Okay, what I'm going to show you today are some limitations in plyometrics that I've begun to realize, and methods, a new method that I think will fix the limitation for most people that maybe they didn't even know they had. And when you're dealing with limitations, when I say this, over the years I've realized that the best jumpers I ever had, if this is your ankle, knee, and hip complex, had great ankle foot complexes, okay? And when I say that, they were always my best jumpers, best runners. Now, when you're using plyometrics, I began to see, especially after this summer, since we created the spring ankle exercises that seem to fix a lot of the ankle problems and the foot problems, along with the ankle rocker stuff that Chris Korfus came up with. It's in our speed manual, the Triphasic speed manual. When you fix them, when you fix this complex with those spring ankle exercises, you realize there's some leftover limitations, and let me explain the limitations to you. So in plyometrics, a majority of the stress that you experience when you're doing, let's say, a hurdle hop or jumping is in the ankle complex. So really, this is what plyometrics are training mainly. And this is why, over the years, my best jumpers have had great calf and foot complexes. So then, the limiting factor in plyometrics is your hip and knee, I began to realize. And when I say that, not limiting factor, but they're not being trained like we think they are. This area of the body's being trained. The hip deals with the upper torso force coming down, being reactive, and that's about it. So the hip gets worked, but in my opinion, it's rarely being trained. If you put EMGs on across the body, you will see, and then the reactiveness and the fatiguing of the plyometrics, it'll fatigue the ankle and the foot more than it does the knee and the hip. Okay? And we're talking good plyometrics. We're talking not metabolic jumping plyometrics where you're just jumping to get fatigued. We're talking high quality work. Now, so then the question becomes, can I get more out of the hip and the knee with a training method that doesn't involve the ankle? So basically create a plyometric that involves the hip and the knee. And this is what I've done, in my opinion. And when I say this, I'll call it the Reflexive Trimetric Method. Okay, so we're going to call it RTM for short. And realistically, when somebody does a hurdle hop, let's say, there's a lot of force on their ankle and their calf, but there's less force on their knee and hip. Okay, so I needed to create methods to increase the force at high velocities of the hip and the knee, and this came up with the RTM method. And what I'll do is I'll basically show you that right now.
Okay, what we have here is a description of the RTM, which is the squat reflexive trimetric method. And what I'll do is I'll keep playing this back, and as you can see, what we have here is basically, at this point, we have bands. I'll show a video later on the setup of this with the bands hooked and on two sides of the rack, and what they are is chained to a harness to give you a couple 100 pounds of force at the top, and done at high speeds, high velocity. With this movement, you can see the athlete is using their quads and hips more than in the plyometric method of like doing a hurdle hop, where the calf is being trained mostly. So we're gonna address the limitations of plyometrics by using this method, and you can see how fast the athlete's going up and down. And we're talking, some of our athletes can get up to 2 meters per second with a couple hundred pounds of force, if not more, because some of the athletes even were able to lift the rack off the ground, moving at 1.7 to 2 meters per second. But again, this is just to train your hips and your knees because of the limitations of true plyometrics, like jumping over hurdles or just in general jumping.